The rain had not stopped in 3 days, and Nora Whitfield had learned to measure her life in the small mercies of buses that came on time. This one hadn't. She stood beneath the sagging awning of the laundrette on Corporation Street, watching the number 47 pull away from the far stop without her, its windows fogged and gold-lit, and she did not run for it. Running cost energy, and energy was the one currency she could no longer afford to spend carelessly. Behind her, through the glass, the dryers turned in their slow orbits, and somewhere in the third one from the left were the only 2 school shirts her daughter owned that still fit. Nora was 34 years old. She looked on that gray Manchester morning considerably older, and she knew it, and she had stopped minding. Minding was another expense. Her phone buzzed. A text from the letting agent, the 4th in a week, each one a little colder than the last. Miss Whitfield, this is a final courtesy. Arrears must be cleared by Friday or proceedings will begin. She read it twice, not because the meaning was unclear, but because she was searching, as she always did, for some hidden clause of kindness she might have missed. There was none. There never was. She put the phone away and turned back to watch the dryer, and that was when she saw the man. He was standing across the road, under a black umbrella that looked as though it had cost more than her monthly rent, and he was looking at her. Not past her, not through her, the way people looked at women who queued at food banks and counted coins at tills. At her. Directly. He was perhaps 60, silver-haired, in a charcoal overcoat, and there was something in his stillness that made the ordinary street feel briefly like a stage. Nora had spent her adult life learning to read the intentions of men who looked at her. This one did not frighten her, which was itself unusual enough to hold her attention. He crossed the road when the traffic broke, unhurried, folding his umbrella as he stepped under the awning, and up close she saw that his eyes were a pale, tired gray, and that he had been crying, or was about to. "Miss Whitfield," he said, "it was not a question." "Whoever you're looking for," she said, "I can't pay them either." The ghost of a smile. "I'm not a creditor. My name is Edmund Ashworth. I'm a solicitor." He reached into his coat and produced a card, heavy cream stock, embossed. Ashworth, Blackwood and Finch, Private Client Practice, Est. 1911, Lincoln's Inn Fields, London, a world away from Corporation Street. I've been trying to reach you for 11 days. Your telephone appears to be disconnected, Nora said. "Yes, it does that when you don't pay it." She did not take the card. "What do you want?" Edmund Ashworth looked at her for a long moment, and something moved behind his eyes, some grief he was holding at arm's length with great effort. "I'm afraid I have news that will be difficult to hear," he said. "It concerns a woman named Eleanor Vance. Does that name mean anything to you?" It didn't. And then distantly it did, a scrap of a memory, her mother's voice, low and tight, on one of the rare occasions she had spoken of the past at all. "Your grandmother's people were Vances, cold as the grave, the lot of them. Whatever they offer you, Nora, you take nothing." Her mother had been dead 4 years now. She had left instructions and nothing else. "I've heard the name," Nora said carefully. "Why?" "Because 8 days ago," Edmund Ashworth said, "Eleanor Vance died, and under the terms of her will she has left the entirety of her estate to you." He paused. "You may wish to find somewhere to sit down. The estate is valued at something in excess of £400 million. The dryer stopped turning. In the sudden quiet, Nora Whitfield heard her own heart, and the rain and nothing else at all. She did not, in the end, sit down. She stood very straight, the way she had trained herself to stand in front of housing officers and unsympathetic magistrates, and the fathers of children her own daughter was no longer allowed to play with, and she said, "No." Edmund Ashworth blinked. "I beg your pardon." "No," she said again. "People like me don't inherit £400 million from strangers. So either you've made a mistake, or this is a cruelty I don't understand yet, or you want something. Which is it?" And Edmund Ashworth, who had in 40 years of practice delivered news of inheritance to the greedy and the grateful and the disbelieving, and had thought himself beyond surprise, found that he was, for the first time in a very long while, moved. Because she was right to ask. Because the world had taught her that ask, and she had learned it well, and there was a fierce and battered intelligence in her that Eleanor Vance, cold and terrible and dead, had somehow known would be there. "May I buy you a cup of tea, Miss Whitfield?" he said. "Not here, somewhere warm. What I have to tell you will take some time, and not all of it is good news. In fact, very little of it is simple." He hesitated. "Eleanor Vance did not leave you her fortune out of love. She left it to you because you are the only person alive who can do what she could not. And there are people, powerful people, who have spent 30 years making very certain that it was never done at all." Nora looked through the glass at the third dryer from the left, at 2 small school shirts, at the entire visible boundary of the life she understood. "My daughter finishes school at 3, she said. "I have to be there, I'm always there." "Then we have until 3, said Edmund Ashworth, and he opened his umbrella. The cafe he chose was nothing grand. A quiet place near the cathedral with steamed windows and a proprietor who knew not to hover. And Nora suspected he had chosen it precisely because it would not make her feel poor. That small consideration told her more about the man than anything he had yet said. He ordered a pot of tea for 2 and waited until it had steeped before he began. "Eleanor Vance," he said, "was born in 1938 in a house called Wisteria Court in the Cotswolds. She was the elder of 2 sisters. The younger was named Margaret." He watched Nora's face. "Margaret Vance was your grandmother." "My grandmother's name was Peggy," Nora said. "Peggy Hale." "Margaret, Peggy. Yes." Edmund nodded slowly. "She changed her name when she left, in 1961. She left, Miss Whitfield, because of something that happened at Wisteria Court, something the family spent a great deal of money to ensure was never spoken of again. Your grandmother took the secret and her married name, and she disappeared into ordinary life. And she raised your mother, and your mother raised you, and none of you ever knew that 400 miles south there was a family that had erased you from its history on purpose." Nora's tea sat cooling. "What happened in 1961? "That," said Edmund Ashworth, "is the question Eleanor spent the last 30 years of her life trying to answer. And the reason she has left you everything is that she believed, she was certain, that the answer is still hidden inside Wisteria Court, in documents, in a room that has been locked since before you were born." He drew a long breath. "But the will has conditions. You do not simply receive the money. To inherit, you must go to the house, and you must find what Eleanor could not. There is a family mystery, Miss Whitfield, and she has made you the only person with the legal right and the blood right to solve it." Outside, the rain came harder against the glass. Nora thought of her daughter, of the arrears, of the number 47 pulling away gold-lit into the dark. "Tell me everything," she said, "from the beginning, and don't leave anything out because you think it'll frighten me. I've been frightened my whole life. I'd like just once to know exactly what of." Edmund Ashworth poured the tea and began. Edmund Ashworth turned his teaspoon slowly against the china, the way a man does when he is deciding how much of a terrible thing to carry across a table. "Because guilt outlives almost everything," he said. "It outlived Eleanor's marriage. It outlived her health. In the end, I think it was the only thing that kept her alive as long as it did." He looked up. "In 1961, your grandmother did not simply leave home, Miss Whitfield. She was made to leave. She saw something at Wisteria Court that she was never meant to see, and when she refused to be quiet about it, the family gave her a choice. A sum of money and a new name and a train ticket north, or the alternative, which was that they would make certain no one ever believed a word she said again. She was 23. She had no allies and no proof. She took the train." "And Eleanor," Nora asked, "the sister, she stayed?" "She stayed. She married well, as the phrase used to go. She spent 40 years as the respectable Mrs. Vance Harrington, hostess of the county, patron of a dozen good causes." Edmund's mouth tightened. And she knew every single day that her sister had been telling the truth. She had helped to send her away. She was young too and frightened of the same people, and she made the coward's choice, and she never forgave herself for it. When her husband died and the last of the people she feared were in the ground, she began, quietly, to try to put it right. She hired investigators. She hired me. She spent 9 years and a great deal of money trying to prove what happened in the summer of 1961. And she failed. She failed, Edmund agreed, because the one thing she needed was locked inside a room in her own house that she could not legally open. He set the spoon down. The East Wing of Wisteria Court was sealed under the terms of her late husband's estate. A trust arrangement, clever, cruel, and entirely watertight, drafted by his family's solicitors precisely so that certain papers could never be examined by Eleanor, or by any executor, or by any court, so long as the Harrington trustees objected. And they objected to everything always. He met her eyes, but the trust makes one exception. It can be opened by a blood descendant of the Vance line who takes up legal residence at the house. Eleanor had no children. Her sister's line was thought extinct deliberately because they had erased it. A pause. And then 4 years ago, an investigator Eleanor had almost stopped paying found a death certificate, your mother's, and on it a next of kin, you. Nora sat very still. So I'm not an heir, she said quietly. I'm a key. Something in Edmund Ashworth's face, respect and sorrow, and a kind of relief that she had understood so quickly, settled into place. Yes, he said, that is precisely what you are. And I think you should know that Eleanor knew it too, and it shamed her. She did not want to reach out to you as a stranger and offer you a fortune to solve her conscience. She wanted to meet you. She wrote you 11 letters over 3 years. She never sent one. He reached into his case and withdrew a bundle, cream envelopes tied with a faded ribbon, unsent, each addressed in a careful, arthritic hand to Miss Nora Whitfield, Manchester. She left instructions that these come to you regardless of whether you accept anything else. They're yours. She said her words that you were owed the truth even if you wanted none of the money. Nora looked at the bundle and did not reach for it. Not yet. A woman learns, when the world has been unkind, to be careful of the first thing offered gently. You said not all of it is good news, she said. You said there were people, powerful people. Who are they, and what do they want? Edmund Ashworth was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke his voice had dropped, though the cafe was nearly empty. The Harrington Trust is still administered, he said, by the descendants of the family that drafted it. The principal trustee is a man named Sir Julian Harrington Crewe. He is Eleanor's late husband's great-nephew. He is a member of the House of Lords, a former minister, and the chairman of a foundation that has received, over the decades, a great deal of money that ought to have gone elsewhere. He let that sit. Sir Julian has known for some time that Eleanor was trying to open the East Wing. He has known for 4 years that a descendant of Margaret Vance existed. And he has spent those 4 years ensuring, through entirely legal and beautifully deniable means, that you would never be found, never be told, and never inherit. Then how am I sitting here? Because Eleanor was cleverer than he was, Edmund said, and for the first time he almost smiled. She lodged the operative documents not with her own solicitors, whom Sir Julian watched, but with mine, an old firm he had no reason to connect to her. She paid us in advance for a decade. She left instructions that on her death one solicitor, not a courier, not a letter that could be intercepted, but a person, was to go to Manchester and stand in front of you and say the words aloud. He spread his hands. I am that person, Miss Whitfield. And I will tell you plainly, the moment you accept, Sir Julian Harrington Crewe will know, and he will not be pleased. He has a great deal to lose if what is in that room ever sees daylight. Men like him do not lose things quietly. Nora Whitfield thought about fear, which she knew the way some people knew the streets of the town they'd grown up in, every corner, every shortcut, every place it waited. She thought about her daughter's 2 school shirts turning in a dryer, and the text message that said proceedings will begin, and a woman she'd never met writing 11 letters she never dared send. How long, she asked, do I have to decide? The will gives you 60 days from formal notification to take up residence, Edmund said. I notified you 19 minutes ago. So 59 days and the rest of this one. He hesitated, and then, because she had asked him not to leave things out, he added, but I would not use all of them, because Sir Julian will spend every day you delay finding a reason you should never be allowed through the door. And there is a child to think of. Yours. If you do this, she comes with you. I won't pretend that's without risk. Nora looked at the bundle of 11 unsent letters. Then, slowly, she reached out and took them, and held them in her lap the way you hold something that might be either a gift or a wound. I finish at 3, she said. I have to get her. She stood, gathering her coat. Give me until tomorrow, Mr. Ashworth. There's someone I have to talk to first. Of course. May I ask who? Nora paused at the cafe door, rain silvering the glass behind her. My daughter, she said. She's 9. She's the smartest person I know, and she deserves a vote in whether we walk into something that might not let us walk back out. And then, with the ghost of the first real smile Edmund had seen from her, she'll have questions you can't answer. So will I bring better ones tomorrow? She stepped out into the rain, the letters buttoned inside her coat against her heart, and Edmund Ashworth watched her go and thought that Eleanor Vance, wherever she now was, had chosen exactly right. Wisteria Court did not welcome people, it endured them. Nora understood this within an hour of arriving. The house was Jacobean at its heart, Victorian at its edges, and cold all the way through 300 rooms of history that had never once been asked whether it wanted to be lived in. The staff who remained, a housekeeper named Mrs. Aldous and a groundsman named Peter Rook, greeted her with the flat courtesy of people who had been told to expect an impostor and were reserving judgment. Her daughter, Emmy, took one look at the great staircase and said, "It's like a church that's cross with everyone," which was, Nora thought, the most accurate thing anyone had said about the place. They had been in residence 11 days. In those 11 days, Nora had learned the geography of her strange new life. She had learned which floorboards announced you and which kept your secrets. She had learned that Mrs. Aldous softened by a single degree each time Nora made her own tea instead of ringing for it. She had learned that the East Wing, the sealed heart of everything, was reached through a corridor that had been papered over, wallpaper hung directly across a doorway sometime in the 1980s so that a stranger would never know a door was there at all. Peter Rook had shown her, reluctantly, one evening, running his thumb along the seam. They didn't want it found, he'd said. Not locked. Hidden, there's a difference, and the difference is the tell. And in those 11 days, Sir Julian Harrington Crewe had struck 3 times. The first was a letter, courteous, lethal, from the trustees' solicitors, questioning whether Nora's residence was bona fide or merely a device to trigger a contingent interest, and giving notice that they would be applying to the court for a determination. The second was a visit from a valuer nobody had requested, who arrived with a clipboard and a false smile and spent 2 hours photographing rooms before Edmund Ashworth, summoned by phone, had him removed. The third was quieter and worse. Emmy's new school, arranged only the week before, had abruptly written to say the place was no longer available. No reason given, none needed. Nora had recognized the shape of it at once. The long, deniable reach of a man who did not shout, but who could make a village close its doors to a 9-year-old girl to teach her mother a lesson. That was the one that had decided her. Threaten Nora and she would weigh it. Threaten Emmy and she would open every locked room in England. He's clever, Edmund said. He had driven up from London and now sat in the one warm room in the house, the old morning room, where Nora had made a kind of camp, a card table, Eleanor's papers, a map of the house, and Emmy's coloring pencils all sharing the same surface. Sir Julian never does anything that can be called a threat. He simply arranges for the world to become inhospitable to you, and lets you draw the obvious conclusion. Then we stop reacting to him, Nora said, and we start moving faster than he can. She tapped the map, the papered-over doorway. "The will says I have to find what Eleanor couldn't. Not open a door, find a thing. So the door is only the first lock. What did Eleanor already know?" Edmund spread the investigator's files. She knew the outline. In the summer of 1961, a man died at Wisteria Court. His name was Thomas Bell. He was the estate manager, clever, ambitious from nothing, exactly the sort of man the Harringtons used and discarded. The official record says he drowned in the ornamental lake. Accidental. A tragedy. "Your grandmother, Margaret, was 23 and she and Thomas Bell were close. More than close, I think," he said it gently. "Margaret did not believe it was an accident. She said so, loudly. And that is when the family gave her the money and the train ticket and the new name." Nora went very still. "So it's not money," she said slowly, the thing she'd wondered about since the cafe. "The room, it's not about a fortune." "It may be both," Edmund said. "But at the center of it, Miss Whitfield, Nora, at the very center, I believe there is a death that was called an accident and was not. And I believe your grandmother knew who did it. And I believe Thomas Bell, being the careful, clever, upward-climbing man he was, kept records. Insurance. Because men like him always do." He looked at the hidden door on the map. "Eleanor thought those records are in the East Wing, in Thomas Bell's own hand. She thought that is why the room was sealed by the very family that had the most to lose." From the doorway, a small voice said, "Then why hide the door instead of just burning what's inside it?" They both turned. Emmy stood there in her school jumper, the school that had turned her away, holding a mug of squash in both hands, watching them with the unhurried seriousness she had inherited whole from her mother. "Because," Nora said after a moment, "you can't burn what you can't legally touch either." She looked at Edmund. "The trust cuts both ways. It kept Eleanor out, but it kept them out too, didn't it? Whatever's in there, the Harringtons couldn't destroy it without opening the room, and opening the room meant admitting it existed." "A stalemate," Edmund said quietly. 60 years long, everyone frozen around a locked door, none of them able to move first." He looked at her with something close to wonder. "Eleanor said you'd see it faster than the lawyers did. I confess I didn't quite believe her." "I've spent my whole life reading the fine print of people trying to get rid of me," Nora said. "It's not cleverness, it's practice." She stood and crossed to the papered wall in her mind, already there. "Emmy's right. The question isn't how they hid it, it's why they couldn't destroy it. And if I'm the only person alive who can open that room legally, then the moment I do, whatever's protected them for 60 years stops protecting them." She turned. "Which means Sir Julian isn't trying to slow me down out of spite. He's racing me. He's found a way to get in there before I can, or he's about to. Hasn't he?" Edmund's silence was its own answer. Nora looked at the hidden door on the map, and then at her daughter, and then out the tall, cold window toward the ornamental lake where, one summer 60 years ago, a clever man from nothing had died and been called unlucky. "Then we open it tonight," she said. "Before he does, get me everything you have on the trust's wording, Edmund. I want to know the exact moment I'm allowed to put my hand on that wall, and I want a witness in this house when I do, someone Sir Julian can't buy or frighten. Because the second that room is open, the stalemate's over, and I don't intend to be the one caught flat-footed when it ends." The witness Edmund found was named Constance Acaffer, a retired circuit judge who had known Eleanor slightly and disliked Sir Julian considerably, and who arrived at 9 that evening in a sensible car with a flask of coffee and the air of a woman who had waited a long time for something interesting to happen. "I'm not here to help you break the law," she told Nora at the door, shaking off the rain. "I'm here to make certain that when you don't, there's someone whose word a court will take. There's a difference, and at my age it's the only kind of excitement left to me." She looked past Nora into the great cold hall. "So, where's this famous door?" They went up together, Nora, Edmund, Constance, and Emmy, who had refused with quiet finality to be sent to bed and whom Nora had decided not to fight, because the child had earned the right to see, and because Nora did not want her out of sight in a house that had already reached for her once. The corridor was long and papered in a faded green that had been chosen, decades ago, precisely because it was forgettable. Peter Rook was waiting at the seam with a lamp and a look of grim satisfaction. "Been wanting to do this 30 years, he said. "Never had the right. You've the right now, Mrs. Ashworth shown me the wording twice." "Read it once more," Nora said, out loud for the judge. Edmund read it, the clause that opened the sealed portion of the estate to a lineal descendant of Margaret Vance taking up bona fide residence, which Nora now was, 11 days proven, witnessed, and dated. Constance Acaffer listened with her head tilted, and at the end she said simply, "That's clean. It's hers to open. Go on, my dear. History's waiting and I've a flask going cold." Nora set her hand against the seam in the wallpaper. Under the paper, the shape of the door was suddenly, obviously there. A rectangle the house had been pretending wasn't a rectangle for 30 years. She dug her nails into the seam and pulled, and the old paste gave with a sound like a held breath finally let go, and the paper tore back in a long ragged sheet to reveal a door of black oak, and a lock, and set into the lock's brass face, the letters T.B. Not the Harrington's initials, not Eleanor's. Thomas Bell's. "He fitted the lock himself," Edmund breathed. "The estate manager. He sealed his own records in and kept the key." "Which is long gone," Constance said. "So unless one of you has." "I have," Nora said. They all looked at her. From her coat pocket she drew a small tarnished key on a loop of ribbon, and beside it, one of the 11 cream envelopes open now, its seal broken. "Eleanor's 9th letter," she said, her voice not quite steady for the first time all evening. "I read it last night. She wrote that Margaret, my grandmother, took one thing with her on the train north in 1961, just one. She thought it was worthless, a key to a room she'd never see again." Nora turned it in the lamplight. "It was in my mother's things. It's been in a biscuit tin in Manchester for 4 years. I nearly threw it out." She fitted the key to the lock. It turned stiff, then sudden, and the black oak door of Thomas Bell's sealed room swung inward on 60 years of dark. Inside was not treasure. It was better and worse. A clerk's room. A desk, a chair, shelves of ledgers, a filing cabinet, everything furred with dust and untouched since a summer when Kennedy was president and Margaret Vance had not yet become Peggy Hale. And on the desk, weighted under a smooth gray stone from the ornamental lake, a single leather folder, and on the folder, in a firm upward-striving hand, one word: insurance. Thomas Bell had known he was in danger. He had written it all down, and he had made certain that the only door to his account could be opened by the woman he loved, or her blood, and by no one else on earth. Nora opened the folder. She read the first page in silence, and then the second, and the color went out of her face, and something harder came into it. "What is it?" Edmund asked. Nora looked up. When she spoke, her voice was very calm, the calm of a woman who has just understood that the story is much larger than the room it was hidden in. "He didn't die because of who he loved," she said. "That's what everyone assumed. Eleanor assumed it, my grandmother assumed it, but that's not why they killed him." She turned the folder so they could see the ledgers copied in Bell's careful hand, columns of figures, dates, initials running across decades. "Thomas Bell found out that the Harrington Trust, the one that's kept this room sealed for 60 years, was built on money that was never theirs. Charitable money, wartime money, meant for other people. He found the paper trail in 1961, and he was going to take it to someone, and that is why he drowned." She set the folder down. "The love, the scandal, sending my grandmother away, that was the cover story. A jealous tragedy is easy to believe. It's tidy. Nobody looks past it." Her eyes came up and found Edmund's. "They let the world think he died over a woman, so that nobody would ever ask whether he died over the money." Silence in the cold room. Constance Acaffer set down her flask, all levity gone. "And Sir Julian's foundation," she said slowly, "the one that's received a great deal of money over the decades." "Is the same trust," Nora finished. "Still running, still administered by his family. 60 years and it never stopped." She looked at the ledgers, at a dead man's careful hand, at the machinery of a theft that had been quietly working every single day of her own life without her ever knowing it existed. This was never about the past. Thomas Bell didn't leave evidence of an old crime. He left the first page of one that's still going. Somewhere far below in the great sleeping house, a telephone began to ring, the old landline, the one nobody used, its bell shrill and insistent in the dark. Peter Rook went white. "Nobody has that number," he said. "Nobody's rung that line in years." Nora looked at the ringing dark below, and then at the folder in her hands, and she understood, the way she understood most things a beat before anyone else, because she had spent her life learning too. "He knows," she said quietly. "The stalemate's over. I told you he was racing us." She closed the folder and held it against her chest, and her voice when it came was steady as stone. "Somebody in this house told him the second that door opened. Which means one of the people who's been so very kind to me since I arrived doesn't work for me at all." She did not look at Mrs. Aldis's part of the house, or at Peter, or at anyone. She simply let the thought stand in the room where they could all feel it. "Don't answer it," she said. "Let it ring. He wants to hear my voice shake. He's going to be waiting a very long time." The telephone rang and rang and rang, and in Thomas Bell's cold sealed room 4 adults and 1 9-year-old girl stood around 60 years of proof, and did not move.